When we usually think about war, we come up with some conventional images like two or more sides are indulged in a position of conflict about something which is very much essential to them. The dispute among the sides could be based upon anything like water, land, economics, trade, etc. From the old age to our modern age, these conflicts remain the same, but the definition of war has changed through time. After two devastating world wars, which had an everlasting impact on people's lives, things were supposed to become normal, but it didn't happen as expected. Although the birth of United Nations, along with several peace pacts with nations, gave a ray of hope to the world, but it was all on the outside. Fall of regimes, introduction of democracy, difference of opinion among political leaders of the world was just a start of a new age of war, which is now regarded as Cold War. It was a dawn of a new age of conflicts where we didn't know who was on the Axis side and who was on the Allied side because of the complexity of conflict, and if truth be told, we were simply incapable of finding out. 1947 to 1971 was the period of Cold War. In the span of 24 years, the world almost saw an imminent war between the USA and Soviet Union. The tensions among these two nations produced many forms of technological advancements on the field of military warfare and many other things. We will only focus on the naval warfare, where these two nations managed to create a perfect weapon of destruction known as submarines. We will try to understand the nature of specific type of warfare and hopefully come up with a lot of explanations and interpretations. We will also try to present some fact and ramifications of this type of warfare and what lies ahead in the future. This is a brief history of the development of submarines. Before we can talk about Cold War, we need to go back to Second World War. Type-XXI submarines of Germany, which was designed in the Second World War, influenced many of the post-war technologically evolved submarines in the United States. The United States Gato, Balau and Tench class submarines and the Soviet submarine project named Whiskey, Zulu and Romeo by NATO. The Chinese built Romeo class submarines and the subsequent Min class were based on Soviet blueprints. We will discuss this at the end of the video. Facts of Type-XXI submarines. They were the most advanced submarines to go to sea during Second World War. First submarines designed to operate primarily submerged, incorporated many batteries to increase the time they spend submerged. It only needed to surface to periscope depth for recharging via a snorkel. A snorkel is a device which allows a submarine to operate submerged while still taking in air from above the surface. But these types of submarines had some flaws, such as they were mechanically unreliable, vulnerable to combat damage, engines were underpowered, which limited the surface speed and increased the time required to charge the batteries. Also, the hydraulic system was over-complex and its main elements were located outside the pressure hull. This made the system highly vulnerable to corrosion and damage. The snorkel was also badly designed and difficult to use in practice. In total, 118 Type-XXI submarines were completed. 4 was combat ready, 2 was put on active service but never used. Use of Type-XXI submarines in Second World War and afterwards. Let's come to Germany. U-2511 and U-3008, later used for war patrols but never sank any Allied ships. U-2540, also known as Wilhelm Bauer, primarily used for research purposes until 1982. Since 1984, it was made available for display to the public by the German Maritime Museum in Bremerhaven, Germany. We shall talk about France now. U-2518, also known as Roland Marriott, used for active service during the Suez Crisis in 1956. Its fate was not so well. It surrendered by Nazi Germany in 8 May 1945, transferred to France 1946. Now comes Soviet Union. 4 types of Type-XXI boats were assigned to the USSR by Potsdam Agreement. They were U-2529, U-3035, U-3041 and U-3515, which were commissioned into Soviet Navy as B-27, B-28, B-29, B-30, later known as B-100, respectively. The type of Type-XXI designed formed the basis for several Soviet design projects. Project 611, 613, 614, 633, 644. These became the submarine classes known by their NATO codes as Zulu, Whiskey, and Romeo submarine classes. United Kingdom. U-3017, also known as HMS N-41, used for tests. On 9 May 1945, U-3017 surrendered at Horten, Norway, before participating in any war patrols. She was later transferred to Oslo on 18th May 1945, then moved to Lisally, Northern Ireland, on 3rd June 1945, arriving 7th June 1945. U-3017 would be spared for a time, becoming a British N-class submarine. N-41 used for testing and then in November 1949 broken up at Newport, Wales. Let's come to United States now. U-2513, the submarine that dived 440 feet or 130 meters deep with President Harry S. Truman on board when he visited U-2513 in 1946, and U-3008 was operated in Atlantic Ocean. Type-XXI submarines paved way for many other advanced submarines in the post-World War II era and in the coming years. Our focus was to go through the history of submarines and which of them were used for creating many more of them. We are not focusing in the in-depth details like the structures of a submarine and how they are made. Maybe in the future we will try to cover this kind of detail. For now, let us understand the history of submarines in the wartime and post-war era and how they were used as a dominating force to impose one's national power in the vast sea. Goodbye.
President Truman announced the official surrender.
This is a solemn but glorious hour. I wish that Franklin D. Roosevelt had lived to see this day. General Eisenhower informs me that the forces of Germany have surrendered to the United Nations. The flags of freedom fly all over Europe. For this victory, we join in offering our thanks to the Providence which has guided and sustained us through the dark days of adversity and into light. Much remains to be done. The victory won in the West must now be won in the East. The whole world must be cleansed of the evil from which half the world has been freed. United, the peace-loving nations have demonstrated in the West that their arms are stronger by far than the might of dictators or the tyranny of military cliques that once called us soft and weak. The power of our peoples to defend themselves against all enemies will be proved in the Pacific War as it was proved in Europe.